Hey guys, PepperAmmy here. This week we are making English muffins. Now, as a warning, it is a very loose dough with a high hydration level compared to normal bread doughs, so it is advised to have some sort of electric or hand mixer to help. Now you want to start by combining 180 ml of milk, 120 ml of water, and 2 tablespoons of sugar in a measuring jug for convenience, or a bowl, and then heat until warm but not hot. You want it so you can gently place the back of your finger in it and it doesn't feel too hot, and you can hold it there for a while. Now, if you are like me and you slightly overheated your mixture, just let it cool down for a few minutes. Then, once slightly cooled, you want to add in 7 grams of dry active yeast or 14 grams of fresh yeast if that is all you can get hold of, like me this week. Then you want to stir and set aside for around 5 minutes or until a foamy top forms on top, and this shows that your yeast is nice and active. Now, whilst you are waiting for your yeast to bloom, preferably in the bowl of a stand mixer, combine 330 grams of white flour and a teaspoon of salt and give a quick stir to distribute the salt throughout. Next, you want to add 1 whole egg and around 40 grams of melted butter to your yeast and milk mixture, and then add to the flour mixture and mix using the paddle attachment rather than the dough hook if you are using a stand mixer, as this is going to be a very loose dough. Now, of course, you can do this by hand, and I recommend using at least a wooden spoon or something similar, but this will be quite a thick but wet dough, so it will be quite hard to mix. It is a lot easier to use a stand mixer if you have one on hand. Then you just want to mix it for a couple of minutes, around 7 minutes or so, until the dough becomes nice, smooth and elastic. Now, as I say, this is a very wet dough, but if it is too wet, you can add in some extra flour. Now, as I personally know, the flour that I use has a really bad hydration rate, and I always need to use some extra. Now, once the dough is mixed together, you want to place in a well-oiled bowl and let proof for around an hour, covered with a damp tea towel. Now, you can either go for an hour, or if it's a warmer day, until it is doubled in size, or optionally you can proof it overnight in your fridge to make fresh English muffins in the morning. Now, once the dough has risen, transfer to a floured counter and then realise your dough looks weird with all the bubble marks. Now, to top your muffins, you will need some cornmeal or semolina. Now, I only had corn flour, which was a very fine cornmeal. But luckily I had some popcorn in my drawer. Now all you need to do is just place the popcorn in a spice grinder or blender and blitz until it is broken down into a coarse meal. Then sift to remove any of the larger, harder chunks of popcorn, and optionally regrind those larger pieces, and then sprinkle some cornmeal over some sheets of baking paper. Then you want to lightly flour the top of your dough and then spread it out until its thickness is around an inch. Now, at this point you can realise your dough is still very wet and will be a pain to shape if you didn't add enough flour. Now it's time for cutting out your muffins. Now, using a well-floured 3-inch round cutter, you want to cut your muffins out and gently transfer them to the baking sheets using a spatula or hands. Now, if like me, your dough is too wet, then you can either wing it and make some weird shaped ones, or you can roll them into a ball and place them into some crumpet molds where they'll just spread out. Now, you don't have to use crumpet molds, you can use any spare 3-inch cookie rings you've got, or some slightly larger ones. I wouldn't go too large, otherwise they'll be very flat. And then you just want to re-roll your scraps and then continue cutting until you have used all of your dough. And then once again, cover loosely with a damp tea towel and let rise for around 30 minutes. Next, you want to place a large dry frying pan or skillet over low heat. Now, I wouldn't recommend cast iron for this, and then you want to warm until you can feel the heat whilst you're hovering your hand a few inches over the surface. Now you want to sprinkle the top of your muffins with some cornmeal and place some of the muffins in the pan. Now I'm using my crumpet rings first. I managed to get 5 in the pan, but it was very cramped, so it's a lot easier if you just do 3 or 4. Now if your dough was a lot more firm and your muffins kept their shape, you can gently place them in the pan and then just try and keep them round with your fingers. Then you want to cover loosely with a lid or just a covering for the pan and cook for 5 to 7 minutes until golden and crisp on the bottom. Then carefully flip and cook for another 5 to 7 until they are golden and crisp on the top as well. Now between your batches you want to give the pan a quick wipe with a dry tea towel just to clean any of the cornmeal that may be left in the pan from your previous batch, and then carry on. Now I did have some odd shaped muffins and I didn't use ring molds or anything on those, but they cooked up exactly the same. They just spread out a little bit. They were deformed in the end, but they cooked up fine. They tasted fine, of course, because the shape's not going to affect the taste in any way whatsoever. They just look a little bit freaky. Now, once you have cooked all of your muffins, the official way to slice an English muffin is using a fork to carefully pry it open from around the sides, which leaves a rough crumb texture on the inside, which toasts up a lot better and gets a lot more crispy. Then if you are toasting them, you just want to top with some butter, some egg, some mushroom, or just use it as a normal bun like you would for anything else. And there you have it, a Englishman kind of making English muffins. Now, if you make these, let me know how they turn out and if they turn out better than mine. As this was my first time making these and I like to just try out new things, but I might also start experimenting with different brands of flour and see if I can get a better flour with a better hydration rate. Anyway, that wraps up this week's video. As always, if you like what you saw, let me know down below with a like and a comment. If you are indeed new here, feel free to subscribe for free weekly cooking content, and I will see you all again next week. Thanks for watching.